Hey guys! Tonight we're going back to June 1881 to the Arctic Ocean north of Siberia, where your ship is dying. You can hear it in the groans of the hull, feel it in the shudder that runs through the deck beneath your frozen boots. You've been trapped in ice for nearly 2 years, drifting nowhere, hoping for everything. And now the ice has decided it's had enough of you. Before we begin, take a moment to like this video if you enjoy what we do here. Drop your city and the time you're watching in the comments. I love knowing who else is awake during these quiet hours. Now settle in, maybe turn down the lights, because tonight you're not just learning about history, you're living it. And you probably won't survive it. It's June 11th, 1881. The USS Jeannette, your prison and your home for the last 21 months, sits locked in the polar ice pack roughly 300 miles north of the Siberian coast. You're one of 33 men who left San Francisco in July 1879 with dreams of reaching the North Pole. That dream has been dead for a long time. Now you're focused on a simpler dream, seeing home again. The ice has been your enemy and your flaw. It's held you captive while you drifted in mad circles across an ocean you can't even see. You've watched the seasons change through a porthole. You've celebrated 2 Christmases on a ship that goes nowhere. You've hunted seals and polar bears on an endless white desert that shifts and cracks and reforms according to laws you don't understand. But today, something is different. The ice isn't just holding you anymore, it's squeezing. You feel it through your boots, through the wooden walls of your bunk, through the air itself which seems to compress around you. The ship tilts. Somewhere below, timber cracks with a sound like a rifle shot. Your commander, Lieutenant George Washington DeLong, has already given the order. Everyone topside, bring the essentials, leave everything else. You've been drilling for this moment, but now that it's here, your hands shake as you roll your blanket, as you grab your journal, as you stuff hardtack into your pockets with fingers that barely feel anymore. On deck, the scene is organised chaos. Men are hauling sleds onto the ice. Others are lowering the 3 boats, the cutters and the whaleboat that you've kept in good repair for exactly this nightmare. The engineer, George Melville, is supervising the removal of provisions. Every biscuit matters now. Every pound of pemmican might mean the difference between life and death. You step off the ship onto ice that's thick enough to hold your weight, but thin enough to crack under the pressure that's killing your vessel. The Jeannette lists to one side now, her masts tilting like the hands of a broken clock. She's been a good ship, reinforced at great expense, strengthened with iron beams and thick timber, designed to withstand exactly this kind of pressure. She's failing anyway. The ice doesn't care about human engineering. It doesn't care about your plans or your country's pride or the newspaper man who paid for all of this. The ice simply is, and right now it is crushing your ship like a hand closing around an egg. You work through the night. The Arctic sun barely sets this time of year, so you labour in a twilight that never quite becomes darkness. You haul scientific instruments onto the ice. You drag barrels of provisions. You save the logs and journals that document 21 months of drift. These records might be the only thing you bring back to civilization. If you bring anything back at all, someone is singing. You can't tell who. It's a whaling song, something about coming home to New Bedford, about wives and warm beds and beer that doesn't freeze in the mug. The singing helps. It reminds you that you're human, that you're not just a machine hauling cargo on the ice. The Jeannette groans again. This time it's deeper, more final. You watch as the portside caves inward. The masts shiver. In the pale light of the Arctic night, your ship looks like a wounded animal. You've loved this vessel the way sailors love ships, because she's kept you alive in a place designed to kill you. Now she's losing that fight. By midnight on June 12th, it's over. The Jeannette slips beneath the ice with a sound like the world sighing. One moment she's there, tilted and broken but still visible. The next moment there's just a hole in the ice, already starting to freeze over. 33 men stand on the ice watching the spot where their ship used to be. No one speaks for a long moment. Then DeLong's voice cuts through the silence, steady and calm. We knew this might happen. We planned for this. We have provisions for 60 days. We have boats. We have each other. We're going home. You want to believe him. You want to trust that the sleds and boats and stacks of supplies around you are enough. But you can feel the cold seeping through your coat. You can feel the vastness of the ice in every direction. And you know with the certainty of frozen fingertips and hollow belly that 60 days of food isn't enough. It's roughly 600 miles to the Siberian coast. That's 600 miles of ice that shifts and cracks. 600 miles of open water that has to be crossed in boats designed for rivers, not Arctic seas. 600 miles with summer ending and winter approaching, with darkness growing longer every day. You're standing on ice in the middle of the Arctic Ocean, with 2 years of imprisonment in your bones, and not nearly enough food in your belly. The dream of the North Pole is dead. The dream of going home is dying. Now there's only the dream of tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that. Listen to the wind moving across the ice. It sounds like breathing, like the Arctic itself is alive and patient and waiting to see how long you can last. Spoiler, it's probably not as long as you think. The morning after the Jeannette sinks, you start doing math that doesn't lead anywhere good. You're not a mathematician, most of the men here aren't, but everyone can count days and miles and mouths to feed, and no matter how you run the numbers, they don't add up to survival. 33 men stand on the ice, you have 3 boats, you have provisions for 60 days if you're careful. You have roughly 600 miles to cover before you reach the Siberian coast. That's 10 miles a day, every day for 2 months. 10 miles doesn't sound like much. Back home you could walk that in 3 hours, but this isn't home, this is the Arctic Ocean in early summer, which means the ice is starting to break up. Some days you'll make 10 miles, some days you'll make 2, some days you'll make negative progress because the ice you're standing on will drift north while you sleep, carrying you away from the destination you've spent all day walking toward. DeLong gathers everyone for a briefing. He has maps spread out on a sled, held down against the wind by chunks of ice. The maps are beautiful, detailed things printed in Germany by a man named August Petermann. They show the islands you've been drifting near. They show the Siberian coast. They show, most importantly, settlements. Little dots with Russian names that promise shelter and food and rescue. The problem is that Petermann's maps are works of fiction dressed up as science. The settlements don't exist. The warm water passage to the North Pole that Petermann believed in doesn't exist. The open polar sea doesn't exist. You know this, because you've been here for 2 years and all you've seen is ice. But DeLong doesn't know the maps are lies. None of you do. So you take comfort in those little dots, those phantom villages that seem so close. 95 miles, DeLong says. 95 miles from where we'll likely make landfall to the nearest settlement. We can do 95 miles. You want to believe him. You want to believe that 9 days from now, 10 at most, you'll be sitting in a warm hut eating bread and fish soup and laughing about your adventure. But your body knows things your mind doesn't want to accept. Your body knows you're already weakened from 2 years on the ship. It knows the cold has been eating at you, stealing calories while you sleep, making every movement cost more than it should. The surgeon, James Ambler, is checking each man's condition. He's a quiet man, competent and thorough. When he examines you, his face doesn't reveal much, but you can see him making notes in his journal. You can see him calculating odds that he's too professional to speak aloud. Here's what Ambler knows that you're just beginning to understand. 2 years in the ice has cost you more than time. It's cost you muscle mass and bone density and the kind of deep reserves that let humans survive extremity. You look at your wrists and they're thinner than you remember. You look at the other men and see hollow cheeks, dull eyes, the kind of fatigue that sleep doesn't fix. The dogs are in even worse shape. You brought them to pull sleds to the North Pole, but for 2 years they've done nothing but eat and sleep and occasionally fight. Now you need them to earn their keep, and they're lethargic, confused, barely able to pull the heavy loads you're asking them to haul. The first day of the march you make barely a mile. The ice is broken and jagged, full of pressure ridges where one floe is crushed into another and frozen at an angle. You have to haul boats and sleds over these ridges, one at a time, while the dogs whine and pull against their harnesses. The boats are heavy, each one weighs hundreds of pounds empty. Loaded with provisions and equipment, they're like dragging houses. You and 6 other men are harnessed to a sled, pulling in unison while someone shouts cadence. Your feet slip on ice, your shoulders burn, the harness cuts into your chest through layers of wool and canvas. You rest every hour. During rests, you don't talk much. Everyone is conserving energy. You eat a piece of hardtack that tastes like cardboard and wishes it were bread. You drink water melted from ice, which somehow tastes both metallic and empty. You look around at the endless white and realize you can't see any landmarks. You can't tell if you're going straight or in circles. Everything looks the same. The second day is worse. Several of the dogs can't pull anymore. DeLong makes the decision quickly and without ceremony. The dogs that can't work are shot. Their meat is divided and added to the provisions. You try not to think about it as mercy. You try not to think about it at all. By the end of the first week, you've covered maybe 20 miles. That's less than half of what you need, and the ice is getting worse, not better. Open water appears in lades that force you to go around. You launch the boats and row for hours, then you haul the boats back onto ice and walk some more. At night, you sleep on the ice in tents that barely cut the wind. You lie in your sleeping bag and listen to the ice crack and groan around you. Sometimes it sounds like thunder. Sometimes it sounds like the earth breaking apart. You know that if the ice splits beneath your tent, you'll wake up in water so cold it'll kill you before you can shout for help. But the ice doesn't split. Not that night. So you wake up and do it again. And again and again, until the calendar says you have been walking for 30 days and you've only covered 200 miles, and everyone has stopped talking about how many more days the food will last because everyone already knows the answer is not enough. Listen to your heartbeat. It's slower than it used to be. That's your body saving energy, shutting down non-essential functions. You're not hypothermic yet, but you're getting there. Day by day, step by step, your core temperature is dropping and there's nothing you can do to stop it except keep moving and hope that the next meal, the next day, the next mile will be the one that saves you. It won't be, but hope is all you have left. That and the knowledge that right now, somewhere ahead of you, the Siberian coast exists. Somewhere ahead is land and shelter and the possibility of rescue. You just have to live long enough to reach it. On July 29th, 1881, after 7 weeks of dragging boats across hell, you see land, real land, not ice pretending to be solid, not pressure ridges that might be islands if you squint, actual stone and dirt rising out of the ocean like the earth remembering it exists. DeLong names it Bennett Island, after the newspaper man who paid for this expedition. You don't care what it's called, you care that it's not moving. You care that you can stand on something that isn't going to drift north while you sleep. The island is small and bleak. Rocks and birds and nothing that looks like food. But it's land, which makes it the most beautiful thing you've seen in 2 years. The men stumble ashore and some of them lie down and kiss the frozen ground. It's theatrical and desperate and completely understandable. You rest here for a week. The surgeon goes around checking feet for frostbite. Most men have it to some degree. Blackened toes, numb patches on heels, skin that's died and just hasn't fallen off yet. Ambler does what he can with bandages and hope. There are no antibiotics in 1881. There's barely pain relief. You just have to endure and pray your body can fight off infection. The naturalist, a man named Newcomb, wanders around collecting rocks and sketching birds. He's still doing science. You admire that. In the middle of a nightmare, he's still trying to understand the world. His notebooks are full of observations about geology and weather and species. If you make it home, those notebooks will be important. If you don't, there'll be a strange epitaph. Here are the rocks that watched us die. The island has bird eggs. Not many, but some. The men climb the cliffs and raid nests and bring back eggs that you fry over a small fire made from driftwood. The eggs taste like fish and salt and life. For one meal, you're not quite so hungry. It doesn't last. You leave the island on August 6th. The sleds are lighter now. You've eaten through a lot of the provisions. The dogs are almost all gone, shot and eaten one by one as they grew too weak to pull. Now it's just men in harnesses, hauling boats toward a destination you hope exists. The ice is breaking up more now. You spend more time in the boats, rowing through channels of open water, then hauling the boats back onto ice when the channels close. It's exhausting work. Your hands are blistered and frozen at the same time. Your shoulders feel like someone is grinding glass into the joints. You see another island on August 20th. It's part of the New Siberian Islands, a chain that's actually on the maps. This is good. It means you're getting closer to the coast. It means the maps aren't completely useless. You don't land on this island. There's no point. You're in the boats now more than you're on ice. The ocean is opening up. Summer is here, such as it is. The temperature might be above freezing. It's hard to tell. Everything still feels cold to the bone. By September, you're in open water. The boats are under sail when the wind allows. When it doesn't, you row. Your hands bleed. The salt water gets into the cuts and burns. You wrap your hands in rags and keep rowing. The food is running low. You're on half rations now, 1 meal a day. Pemmican and hardtack. You eat it slowly, trying to make your stomach believe it's more than it is. It doesn't work. The hunger is constant now, a presence that never leaves. You dream about food. Not fancy food, just bread. Just a loaf of bread with butter. DeLong calls you all together on September 10th. You're approaching another island, Semyonovsky Island, according to the map. It's tiny, just a spit of sand and ice. But it's the last land between you and the Siberian coast, which is less than 100 miles away now. 95 miles, DeLong says. 2 days, maybe 3 if we have good wind. Then we find a settlement, and this is over. We made it. Against all odds, we survived. You want to believe him, everyone does. You can see it in the faces around you, the way men are sitting up straighter, the way someone starts humming a tune. You're close. After more than 2 years, after 600 miles of ice and water and death, you're close to salvation. But you can also see the sky, and the sky looks wrong. There's a heaviness to the clouds, a yellow tinge to the light that sailors learn to recognize. A storm is coming. A big one, and you're about to sail 3 small boats into it with empty bellies and frozen hands and nothing but hope between you and the bottom of the sea. Listen to the wind picking up. It's starting as a whisper, but it's growing. By tonight it'll be howling. By tomorrow it'll be trying to kill you. The Siberian coast is 95 miles away. It might as well be on the moon. You leave Semyonovsky Island on the morning of September 12th, 1881. The storm hasn't arrived yet, but you can feel it in the air, the way the water moves, in the way the light looks wrong. DeLong wants to make miles before the weather turns. So you push off, 33 men in 3 boats, sailing for a coast you can't see but desperately need to believe in. The boats separate almost immediately. Not far, just enough that you can still see the others when you stand up. But they're individual vessels now, each with its own crew and its own destiny. You're in DeLong's boat, the first cutter. 13 men plus the commander. It's crowded. Everyone's knees are touching. The provisions are stacked in the middle, covered with canvas to keep the spray off. Lieutenant Chip commands the second cutter. 8 men with him. Smaller boat, lighter load. You can see him sitting in the stern, one hand on the tiller, looking at the sky with the expression of a man who knows what's coming and doesn't like it. Chief Engineer Melville has the whaleboat. 10 men. He's got Lieutenant Dannenhauer with him, the navigator whose eyes have been giving him trouble for months. Syphilis, the rumour goes, though nobody says it out loud. Dannenhauer can barely see, which is a cruel irony for a man whose job is to find the way home. The morning starts well enough. There's wind, but it's at your backs, pushing you southwest towards Siberia. The boats make good time. You're under sail, which means you're not rowing, which means you're saving energy. The coast is out there somewhere. 95 miles, 2 days. By afternoon the wind picks up, the water gets choppy. Not dangerous yet, just uncomfortable. The boat rises and falls, your stomach rises and falls with it. Some of the men are seasick, leaning over the side, adding nothing to an ocean that already has too much of nothing. Evening comes and the wind is stronger now, the waves are taller. Water sloshes over the gunwales. Someone is bailing constantly, using a canvas bucket to throw water back into the sea. It's like trying to empty the ocean one bucket at a time. But if you stop, the boat gets heavy with water. If it gets too heavy, you will sink. DeLong orders the sail reefed. You're moving too fast now, the boat's skipping across the water in a way that feels more like falling than sailing. You haul on the ropes, fighting the wind for control of the canvas. The sail comes partway down. It helps. Not enough. Night falls and the storm arrives with it. The wind shifts from strong to violent in a matter of minutes. One moment you're being pushed along, the next moment you're being thrown. The waves are mountains now, grey and white and taller than the mast. The boat climbs at each wave like it's climbing a wall, hangs at the top for a breathless second, then slides down the other side into a trough so deep the wind stops, and all you can see is water on every side. You lose sight of the other boats. One moment they're there, 2 dark shapes on the grey water. Then a wave rises between you and everything disappears. When you can see again, the boats are gone. Maybe they're ahead of you, maybe behind, maybe under. You don't know. You can't know. DeLong deploys the sea anchor. It's a canvas drogue that drags behind the boat, slowing you down, keeping the bow pointed into the waves. It's the only thing keeping you from capsizing. The boat still tilts at angles that seem impossible. Water pours over the side, everyone is soaked. Everyone is freezing, everyone is bailing. The storm lasts all night. By dawn on September 13th, you're still alive, but only technically. The boat is full of water. The provisions are soaked. The sail is torn. One of the men isn't moving, and you're not sure if he's unconscious or dead, or just so hypothermic that his body has shut down everything except the parts that keep breath going in and out. The storm keeps going. All day September 13th. All night. The wind screams, the waves break over you. You bail and bail and bail. Your arms are numb, your hands are frozen claws, you can't feel your feet. You're pretty sure you have frostbite, but checking seems like a luxury for people who aren't currently trying not to drown. September 14th. The storm is weaker now. Not gone, just exhausted. The waves are still big, but not mountain big. The wind still howls, but not at the pitch that makes you think the world is ending. You can see again, which means you can see that you're alone on the ocean. No other boats, no land, just grey water and grey sky, and your grey, shaking hands gripping the gunwales. DeLong stands in the bow, looking in every direction. He's calling out. "Can you hear me? Are you there?" His voice is hoarse from shouting over the storm. Nobody answers. The ocean swallows his words and gives nothing back. You don't say what everyone is thinking. The other boats are gone. Chip and his 8 men. Melville and his 10. 21 men disappeared into the storm. Maybe they're sailing ahead of you toward the coast. Maybe they're behind you. Maybe they're at the bottom of the sea where the water is so cold and dark that drowning would be almost a mercy compared to freezing to death on the surface. Listen to the silence after the storm. It's not really silence. There's the slap of water against the hull. There's the creak of wood. There's the rasp of breath from 13 men who've spent 2 days fighting for their lives. But it feels like silence. It feels like the moment after you scream and realise no one heard you. The coast is still out there. Probably. 95 miles has become who knows how many. The storm blew you around. You could be anywhere. The maps are useless. The navigator is gone. You have a compass and a prayer and not much else. You bail some more. You wring out your clothes even though you know they'll just get wet again. You eat a piece of hardtack that's so soaked with seawater it tastes like eating the ocean. Your stomach doesn't care, it's just grateful for something. DeLong sets a course southwest. That's where the coast should be. You trust him because the alternative is not trusting him, and that way lies madness. So you sail southwest into the grey morning and hope that somewhere ahead the ocean remembers to end. September 17th, 1881. 5 days after leaving Semyonovsky Island. 3 days since the storm tried to kill you. You see land. It's low and dark and looks like the end of the world. But it's land, not ice, not water. Land, actual earth. The boat scrapes against mud and sand and you stumble out into water that's only waist deep. Your legs don't work properly. They haven't supported your weight in days. You fall in the shallows and someone helps you up and together you wade to shore. The shore is a nightmare. Mud and ice and marsh grass. Everything is half frozen. When you step, your boot sinks into ooze that sucks at you like the earth is trying to swallow you. Nothing is solid, nothing is dry. This is the Lena Delta, the place where one of Siberia's great rivers empties into the Arctic Ocean. It's not so much land, as it is the place where land gives up and becomes water. DeLong gathers everyone. We're here. We made it. Find the camp. The words come out but nobody cheers. Everyone is too tired, too cold, too focused on the immediate work of unloading the boat before it washes away. You drag the boat higher on the shore. You start piling provisions on ground that isn't quite ground. Everything is soaked. Everything is heavy. You move like old men, even though most of you are in your 20s and 30s. 2 years in the ice, followed by a week of hell, has added decades to your body. There are 13 of you now, DeLong, you, 11 others. Somewhere out there are 20 more men in 2 other boats. You don't know if they're alive. You don't know where they are. You can't help them. You can barely help yourself. The first priority is shelter. DeLong sends men to scout the area. They come back with bad news. There's nothing here. No houses, no settlements, no people, just marsh and scrub and the occasional hut that's been abandoned for so long the roof has caved in. You make camp in the least terrible spot you can find. You stretch canvas over poles and call it a tent. Inside, you huddle together for warmth. Everyone's clothes are still wet. The temperature is below freezing. You're shaking so hard your teeth click together. The surgeon, Ambler, checks everyone over. Frostbite on almost every man. Some worse than others. One man, a seaman named Erickson, has feet that are black and swollen. He can barely walk. Ambler shakes his head but doesn't say what everyone already knows. Ericsson is in bad shape, probably dying shape. The provisions are counted. This is the moment you've been dreading. You lost a lot in the storm. What's left is soaked with seawater. The hardtack is edible, barely. The pemmican is salvageable, but there's not nearly enough. DeLong does the math out loud. 4 days of food, maybe 5 if we're careful, 4 days, and you're still 95 miles from the nearest settlement. According to the maps. Anyway, the maps that have been wrong about everything else. DeLong makes a decision. We leave the non-essentials here. Take only what we need to walk. We move fast, we move light, we get to that settlement before the food runs out. So you bury things in the mud. Scientific instruments, spare clothes. Anything that has weight but won't keep you alive. DeLong keeps his journal and the ship's logs. These are sacred. Everything else is negotiable. September 18th. You start walking. The landscape is hell. Not dramatic hell with fire and demons. Flat, cold, endless hell. Tundra that goes on forever. Rivers you have to ford, ice you have to cross, mud you have to wade through. And always the wind pushing against you. Stealing your heat. Making every step cost more than it should. You make 2 miles the first day. 2 miles. At this rate, you'll reach the settlement in 50 days. You have food for 4 days. The math doesn't work, but you keep walking because the alternative is sitting down and waiting to die, and you're not ready for that yet. At night, you sleep in your tent and listen to Ericsson moan. His feet are getting worse. The smell is bad, which means infection. There's nothing Ambler can do except change the bandages and give him what comfort he can. Nobody says it, but everyone knows Ericsson isn't going to make it. The second day you make 3 miles, a small improvement. But everyone is slower now. The hunger is getting serious. You're on quarter rations, 1 meal a day, and it's not nearly enough. Your body is eating itself. Muscle first, then organs. You can feel yourself getting weaker. Someone spots deer on the 3rd day. One of the men, Alexei, is your hunter. He's a native, taken on in Alaska to help with exactly this kind of situation. He takes a rifle and disappears into the landscape. You wait. Hours pass. You start to wonder if he's gotten lost or frozen or fallen into a river. Then you hear the shot. 1 shot. Then silence. More hours pass. Then Alexei comes back, dragging a deer carcass. It's not a big deer, but it's meat. Actual protein, actual fat, the kind of calories your body is screaming for. You make camp right there. No point walking further today. You need to process this deer. You need to eat. You build a fire, which is an ordeal because everything is wet. But eventually you get flames. You butcher the deer with knives that are dull from 2 years of use. You roast meat over the fire and eat it without waiting for it to cool. The meat tastes like life and you eat until your stomach hurts. Then you eat some more. The deer will give you maybe 3 days of food if you're careful. 3 days. That's 3 more days to walk 90 miles. Still not enough, but better than 4 days to walk 95 miles. Listen to the fire crackle. It's a sound that means warmth, that means humanity, that means civilization. But you're not civilized right now. You're a group of starving men huddled around a fire in the Arctic, eating a deer you killed with your last strength, hoping to live long enough to find a village that might not exist. The fire burns down. The meat is gone. You sleep with full bellies for the first time in weeks. Tomorrow you'll walk again, and the day after, and the day after, until you reach the settlement or until you can't walk anymore. Those are the only 2 options now. There is no plan. See? September 21st, 1881. You've been walking for 4 days since landfall. You've covered maybe 12 miles. The deer is gone. The hardtack is gone. You're back to eating nothing and walking anyway because stopping means dying, and dying is not yet an option your mind can accept. Then someone spots a building, not a tent, not a pile of rocks, an actual structure with walls and a roof. You feel something flutter in your chest that might be hope. Settlements have buildings. Buildings mean people, people mean rescue. You move faster now, stumbling across the tundra toward this promise of salvation. As you get closer, you see it's 2 buildings, actually. Huts made of driftwood wood and sod. They look old, but they look used. Someone has to be here. Someone has to help you. The huts are empty, not abandoned for years empty, recently empty. There's food in the storage area, dried fish, some kind of seal meat. Not much, but more than you have. There's a fire pit with ashes that look fairly fresh. Whoever lives here was here recently. They might come back. DeLong makes another decision. We rest here 2 days. If the owners come back, we ask for help. If they don't, we take what food we can carry and keep moving. You collapse on the floor of the largest hut and sleep for what feels like days, but is probably only hours. When you wake up, you're still tired, still hungry, still cold and dead, but you're not walking. For 2 days you're not walking. That's something. The men spread out looking for anything useful. One group finds a cache of dried fish that's almost good. Another finds some kind of tool that nobody can identify. Alexei finds tracks and signs that tell him a story. People were here a week ago, maybe 2. They left suddenly, probably following the reindeer herds. They won't be back until winter. The food you found gives you maybe 3 more days. You eat carefully, rationing it out. You try to let your body recover. Some of the men's frostbite is improving. Ericsson's is getting worse. Ambler does what he can, which isn't much. He changes bandages. He offers words of comfort that don't comfort. He writes in his medical log, documenting the decline of a man's feet, and by extension, the decline of a man. September 28th. You leave the huts. You've eaten what you could. You've rested as much as you dare. Now it's back to walking. The next settlement is out there somewhere. DeLong shows everyone the map again. Bullen. It's a real settlement. Not a hunting camp. A place with permanent residents and supplies, and probably a way to send word to the outside world. The map says Bullen is about 80 miles from here. DeLong's finger traces a path south and west. Follow the river when we can, cut across land when we have to. 80 miles. 2 weeks of walking at the pace you're managing. 2 weeks, you have food for 3 days. Again, the math doesn't work, but again you walk, because what else is there to do? The landscape changes slightly as you move south. Still flat, still cold. But there are more rivers, more tributaries branching off the main channel of the Lena. You have to ford these rivers. The water is ice cold, literally. Ice is forming on the edges. You wade across and your legs go numb. By the time you reach the other side, you can't feel your feet. You lose a sled. On one crossing. It slips into deeper water and is gone before anyone can grab it. With it goes some of the supplies. Not much. You don't have much to lose. But any loss is catastrophic when you're living on the edge of nothing. October 2nd. Another hut. This one is bigger. Better constructed. A hunting lodge maybe, or a seasonal camp for people who actually know how to survive here. You search it desperately. There's food, real food. A stash of dried fish and what might be caribou meat, and even some kind of bread that's hard as a rock, but still technically edible. You eat. You rest. You examine your feet and find that some of them are damaged beyond repair. Several men have blackened toes now. One has an entire foot that's swollen and dark. Ambler knows what needs to happen in a hospital with proper equipment. Out here, he can do nothing but watch and document. DeLong finds a better map in the hut. Or rather, he finds marks on the wall that might be a map. Scratches in the wood that show rivers and landmarks. He studies them for hours, trying to reconcile these scratches with his printed map. They don't match. The printed map shows settlements that the wall map doesn't show. The wall map shows rivers that the printed map doesn't show. You've been navigating by lies. Peterman's beautiful printed map is fiction. The scratches on the wall of a hunting hut are truth. And the truth is that you're further from rescue than you thought. That night you sleep in a real building for the last time in your life. You don't know it's the last time, of course. You still think you're going to make it. You still think that tomorrow, or the next day, or the day after, you'll stumble into Bullen and this nightmare will end. But your body knows things your mind doesn't want to accept. Your body knows it's shutting down. Your body knows that every day you survive on inadequate food is a day of borrowed time. Your body knows that the interest on that loan is coming due, and you don't have anything left to pay with. Listen to the wind outside the hut. It's picking up. Winter is coming. Not metaphorically, actually coming. In a week, maybe 2, the rivers will freeze. The snow will start falling in earnest. The temperature will drop from dangerously cold to instantly fatal. You need to be in Boulogne before then. You need to be somewhere warm and safe before the Arctic winter arrives and removes all doubt about your survival. You're not going to make it. Deep down, you know, but you don't say it, so nobody does. Because once you say it out loud, it becomes real. So you stay silent and hope that silence can delay the inevitable just a little bit longer. October the 4th, 1881. You've been walking for 17 days since you landed on the Siberian coast. You've covered maybe 40 miles. 40 miles in 17 days, you have roughly 50 miles to go to reach Boulogne. At this rate, you'll get there sometime in November. You won't live that long. Nobody will. Ericsson can't walk anymore. He's been struggling for days, leaning on other men, being half carried, slowing everyone down, and now his feet simply won't hold him. He sits on the ground, and when you try to help him up, he shakes his head. I can't do it. Go on without me. DeLong won't leave him. That's not what officers do. That's not what the Navy does. You don't abandon your men. So you make camp, and everyone knows this is a death watch. Ericsson lies in the tent with his ruined feet and his tired heart. Ambler sits with him. There's nothing the surgeon can do except bear witness. Ericsson dies on October 6th. He simply stops breathing. One moment he's there, the next he's gone. It's almost peaceful, which seems wrong given everything else. But there it is. The first death of the march, not the last. You bury him in the frozen ground, which means you pile rocks over him because you can't dig. DeLong says words from the Bible. Someone says the Lord's Prayer. Then you walk away because there's nothing else to do. The mood changes after Ericsson dies. Up until now, there was a shared fiction that everyone would make it. Now that fiction is broken, if Ericsson died, others will die. Maybe everyone will die, maybe you will die. The thought sits in your mind like a cold stone. Your body is failing in ways you didn't know were possible. Your muscles are consuming themselves for fuel. You can see your bones now, sharp angles under skin that's getting loose. Your face is hollow. Your eyes are sunk in their sockets. You look like pictures of famine victims. You are a famine victim. The hunger is past the point of pain. It's just a fact now. You're hungry. You've been hungry for so long that you've forgotten what full feels like. Food is theoretical. It's something other people have in other places. You have dried fish that's mostly bones and occasional pieces of hardtack that you have to suck on because your teeth are too weak to chew. Your feet are a disaster. You know without looking that some of your toes are dead. They're black and numb and smell wrong. But as long as you can walk, you don't think about them. You just wrap them in rags and shove them into boots that are falling apart and keep going. October the 9th, DeLong makes a decision that everyone knows is necessary but nobody wants to voice. He calls two of the fittest men, Nindemann and Noros, and gives them orders. Go ahead. Move as fast as you can. Reach Boulogne. Send help back for us. It's a death sentence for one group or the other. If Nindemann and Noros succeed, they'll save the rest of you. If they fail, you've just sent 2 men to die alone in the wilderness, and the rest of you will die anyway, just a little slower. Nindemann and Noros pack light. Some food, not much, a rifle, a compass. They leave at dawn and you watch them disappear into the landscape. They walk steadier than the rest of you. They were younger, stronger. They have a chance, and you keep walking slower now. 11 men, instead of 13. The dynamic has changed. You're not a crew anymore, you're not an expedition. You're a group of dying men walking toward a destination that might not exist. October 10th. DeLong writes in his journal. You see him doing it in the tent at night. His hand shakes as he writes. The entry is short. Nothing for supper but a spoonful of glycerin. That's it. That's all there is. A spoonful of glycerin, which is thick and sweet and offers calories but no nutrition. Your body accepts it because your body has no choice. October 14th. You find another hut. This one has nothing in it. Not food, not tools, not even ashes in the fireplace. It's just a shelter from the wind. You sleep there anyway because being out of the wind means you lose heat a little slower. October 17th. Alexei dies. Your hunter, your guide. The man who shot the deer that gave you 3 extra days of life. He dies walking. He's taking a step and then he's falling and then he's not breathing. Just like that, his body decided it was done and shut off without warning. You bury him under rocks like you buried Ericsson. There are fewer people to carry rocks now. It takes longer. DeLong reads from the Bible again, but his voice is hoarse, and you're not sure God is listening anyway. 10 men left. You keep walking. What else is there? Listen to your breathing. It's shallow and fast. Your heart is beating faster than it should because it's trying to keep you warm, trying to keep you alive, but it's running out of fuel to burn. Soon your heart will start making choices. Keep the brain alive. Keep the organs working. Let the fingers and toes go. Let the extremities die. Save the core. Your body is eating your fingers to save your heart. That's what starvation does. That's what the cold does. It forces your body into triage, deciding what lives and what dies. And out here in the Arctic, on half rations and full exposure, more and more parts of you are being marked for death. October 20th, 1881. You can't walk anymore. None of you can. You've reached a place that's slightly less terrible than the surrounding tundra. There are some scrubby bushes here. There's a slight rise that might cut the wind. It's not good, but it's the best you're going to get. DeLong doesn't give an order to stop. Everyone just stops. One by one, you sit down, you put down your pack. You don't talk about making camp because that implies you'll be leaving. You just sit and the sitting becomes staying. There's no food left. The last of the dried fish was eaten yesterday. The glycerine is gone. There's nothing but hunger and cold and the slow realization that this is where your story ends. You're not on the ground more than an hour when 2 men die. Just like that. Cock and Lee. Both seamen, both young, both dead. They sit down and close their eyes and don't open them again. Their hearts simply stopped. There's no drama, no final words, just breathing and then not breathing. You're too weak to bury them. You pile some rocks nearby, more memorial than grave. 8 men left. 8 men lying on the tundra in the Arctic waiting for rescue that isn't coming. DeLong is still writing in his journal. You can see him in the failing light hunched over the book, his hand moving in slow strokes. He's documenting this, recording the end. Someone needs to know what happened here. Someone needs to know you didn't give up, that you fought until there was nothing left to fight with. October 21st, or maybe it's still the 20th. Time is getting strange. You sleep and wake and sleep again, and you're not sure how much time passes between. The sun barely rises at this latitude in late October. There's a grey twilight that might be day, and a darker grey that might be night, and that's all. Someone is crying, you're not sure who. Maybe you. Crying takes energy you don't have, but sometimes the body does things without permission. The tears freeze on your face, your cheeks are chapped and raw. Everything is raw. October 28th. You know this because DeLong says it out loud. Iverson died last night. Or maybe this morning. Iverson is dead, that's the point. Another body that used to be a man, another set of eyes that won't see home. 7 men left. No food, no energy, no hope, just the waiting. You're waiting to see if the rescue arrives before your body quits. That's all survival is now. A race between help and death. You're not alone in this. That's something. The other 6 men are here with you. DeLong, Ambler, Collins the meteorologist and Mills, Boyd the coal heaver, Dressler, Gortz. 7 men who started in San Francisco with dreams of the North Pole and ended in the Siberian mud with dreams of one more day. You talk sometimes, quiet conversations that trail off into silence. Boyd talks about his mother. Ambler talks about medicine he wish he had. Collins doesn't talk much anymore. DeLong keeps writing even though his fingers are so stiff he can barely hold the pen. October 29th. Boyd and Dressler. You wake up and they're cold. Not colder. Cold. The kind of cold that doesn't warm up. Dead. 9 men started this final camp, now there are 5. October 30th. DeLong's last entry. His handwriting is barely legible. The pen scratches across the page. Boyd and Gortz died last night. Collins dying. That's it. That's the entry. No poetry, no philosophy. Just the facts. Just the counting of the dead. You're one of the 5 now. You, DeLong, Ambler, Arsam the cook, Collins who is dying. The 5 of you lie in your tent and listen to each other breathe and wonder whose breath will stop next. Collins goes quiet. His breathing changes. Slower. Shallower. Then it stops. 4. You don't know if you'll see tomorrow. Your body has given up everything it can give up. Your feet are dead. Your hands barely work. Your vision is narrowing to a tunnel. Your thoughts are slow and confused. You know this is dying. This is what it feels like. Not dramatic, not quick, just a slow fade, like a candle burning down to nothing. DeLong is trying to get up. He's crawling toward the door of the tent. Maybe he's trying to get to higher ground. Maybe he's trying to see further. Maybe he's just moving because moving is the last thing he can do. Ambler and Arsam follow. Somehow. You don't know how. Maybe the body has one last reserve, one final burst of energy for those moments when you need to try even though trying is futile. The 3 of them make it maybe 50 yards. Then they stop. You're still in the tent. You're too weak to follow. You watch them through the open flap. 3 shapes on the tundra. Moving. Then not moving, then just shapes. Listen to the silence. There's no wind now. The Arctic has gone still. It's almost peaceful. If you ignore the hunger and the cold and the death, it's almost beautiful. The sky is grey. The land is white. Everything is simple and clean and quiet. This is where your story ends. On the tundra in Siberia in October 1881, you didn't reach the North Pole. You didn't make it home. You didn't even make it to Bulun. You made it here, to this frozen nowhere, and here is where you'll stay, unless something impossible happens, unless somehow, against all odds, someone finds you. Someone who knows where to look, someone who cares enough to search, someone who arrives in time. The odds are not good, but then again, you've been beating bad odds for 2 years. Maybe, just maybe. Let's rewind. September 12th, 1881. The storm. 3 boats separating. While you were in DeLong's cutter, being blown north and fighting for your life, there was another boat. George Melville's whaleboat. 10 men. Different storm, different outcome. Melville is an engineer. He thinks in problems and solutions. When the storm hits, he doesn't panic. He doesn't despair, he calculates. The sea anchor goes out, the sail comes down, the men bail. It's the same storm that nearly killed you, but Melville's boat is handling it differently. Maybe it's luck, maybe it's skill, probably it's both. The whaleboat rides the waves instead of fighting them. Melville keeps the bow pointed into the wind. The boat fills with water but doesn't swamp. They bail constantly, rhythmically, like a machine made of freezing men. The storm pushes them south, further south than DeLong's boat. When they finally sight land, it's a different part of the Lena Delta, further east, closer to one of the main river channels. They make landfall on September the 19th, 2 days after you. The difference is they find people, not immediately, but within a week. 3 native Yakuts in a fishing camp. The Yakuts take one look at these frozen, starving foreigners and understand immediately. These are shipwrecked men. These men need help. The Yakuts don't speak English. Melville doesn't speak Yakut, but need transcends language. The Yakuts share their food, dried fish, seal meat, tea that's hot and sweet and saves lives. Melville and his men eat and warm up and slowly come back to something resembling human. The Yakuts take them to a village, Arhu. It's tiny, maybe a dozen families, but it's warm. There are buildings with fires. There are people who aren't dying. After 2 years in the ice and a week in hell, Melville's party has found civilization. They don't stop. Melville knows there are other boats out there. He knows DeLong is somewhere in the delta. He knows Chip is missing. So as soon as his men can walk, as soon as the frostbite has been treated and the starvation has been addressed, Melville starts organizing rescue. He gets the Yakuts to help him move to a larger village, then to a Russian outpost, Bulun, the place you were trying to reach. Melville reaches it in October. He sends messages. He organizes search parties. He refuses to rest until he knows what happened to everyone. This is what leadership looks like. Not giving speeches, not making grand gestures, just relentlessly pursuing the mission even when the mission has gone sideways. Melville saves his men, then he tries to save yours. Now let's talk about Nindemann and Noros, the 2 men DeLong sent ahead on October the 9th. The 2 men who walked away from a dying camp and into the wilderness with nothing but hope and stubbornness. They're seamen, young, strong. They've survived everything you've survived, but they're just a little bit fitter, just a little bit luckier, just enough to make the difference between life and death. They walk for 10 days through the same landscape that's killing you. They have a rifle but no game to shoot. They have a compass but no map. They have each other and that's about it. They eat anything. Lichen scraped from rocks, bark from the few scraggly trees. One day they find a cache, an old food storage left by hunters. There's not much in it, some rotten fish, some mouldy grain. They eat it anyway. Their stomachs rebel, but their bodies take the calories. October 19th. They stumble into a Yakut camp, Kumak Suot. The Yakuts are kind but confused. These 2 frozen foreigners appear out of nowhere, babbling in a language nobody understands, clearly in distress. The Yakuts give them food and shelter, but they can't understand what Nindemann and Noros are trying to say. There's a village, there's a dying crew, they need help, now, please. But the words don't translate. The urgency doesn't communicate. So the Yakuts take them to Bulun, which is where foreigners should go to talk to authorities. They arrive in Bullen on October 29th, the same day you're lying in your tent waiting to die. They've walked out of death and into rescue, but they haven't forgotten. They immediately start trying to organise help for DeLong. This is where they find Melville. The engineer has been searching the Delta for weeks. He's found nothing. No boats, no men, no traces. He's starting to think everyone is dead. Then Nindemann and Noros walk into Bullen, and he realises DeLong is still out there, somewhere in Melville, the northern Delta. Alive, maybe. Dying, probably. Melville assembles a search party. He gets dog sleds, he gets supplies, he gets guides, and he heads into the same landscape you're lost in, looking for the crew he lost 3 months ago. November 1881. Winter has arrived for real now. The rivers are frozen. The snow is deep. The temperature is far below zero. This is the Arctic winter, the one that kills everything that can't hide or adapt or flee. Melville is searching anyway. He takes his dog team north from Bullen, following Nindemann's rough directions. Go north, follow the river, look for camps. It's not much to go on, but it's all he has. The Delta in winter is a different landscape than the Delta in autumn. Everything is frozen solid now. What was marsh is now ice. What was river is now highway. The dogs can pull sleds where men would have sunk in mud. Melville finds your trail, campsites marked with piles of rocks, abandoned gear, messages left in cairns written in DeLong's handwriting. We're heading south. We're low on food. We're trying to reach Bullen. Please send help. Each message is older than the last. Each campsite is more desperate. Melville can read the story in the debris. Here's where someone died and was buried. Here's where the crew got smaller, weaker, slower. He searches for 3 weeks. His guides want to turn back. It's too cold, too dangerous. The men they're looking for are surely dead by now, but Melville won't stop. He can't. These are his shipmates, his brothers. He will find them or he will die trying. December comes. The search has to stop. Not because Melville gives up, because the Arctic won't allow it anymore. The cold is lethal now, the storms are constant. To continue searching is to die. And dead searchers don't save anyone. Melville returns to Bullen, then to Yakutsk, a city far to the south. He spends the winter there with the survivors, waiting for spring when the search can resume. Lieutenant Dannenhauer wants to search for Chip's boat. The 8 men who disappeared in the storm and were never seen again. But the ice covers the ocean now. There's nowhere to search, nothing to find. Chip and his crew are gone, probably drowned, possibly frozen, definitely dead. The winter passes, slowly, painfully. The survivors recover. They gain weight. They heal, but they can't forget. Out there in the Delta are the bodies of their friends. Out there is DeLong. Out there is the truth of what happened. March 1882. The thaw begins. Melville organises another search. This time he knows where to look. North Delta, the area where Nindemann and Noros left DeLong. It's been 5 months. Everyone knows what they're going to find. But they need to find it anyway. March 23rd, 1882. They find your camp. They find the tent, collapsed under snow. They find the bodies, frozen, preserved, arranged in groups that tell a story. Here's where the first men died. Here's where 3 men tried to reach higher ground. Here's where DeLong made his last journal entry. Melville finds DeLong's body 50 yards from the tent. The commander died crawling towards something. Maybe help. Maybe just a better view. He died trying. That's something. The bodies are arranged carefully, wrapped in canvas, placed in a coffin improvised from driftwood. Melville and his men build a cairn over the grave, a tall pile of rocks topped with a wooden cross. The names of the dead are carved into the wood. George Washington DeLong, commander. James M. Ambler, surgeon. Jerome J. Collins, meteorologist. And the others. All the men who walked out of the ice and into death. Melville recovers the journals, DeLong's log, Ambler's medical notes, Collins's scientific observations. Everything is there. The whole story, the march, the hunger, the deaths. All of it recorded in frozen ink. The search for Chip continues through April. Melville examines every mile of coast where the boat might have washed up. He finds nothing. No boat, no bodies, no wreckage. Chip and his 8 men have vanished into the Arctic as completely as if they never existed. Listen to the wind across the tundra. It sounds the same in March as it did in October. The Arctic doesn't change, it doesn't mourn, it doesn't remember. It simply is, cold and vast and indifferent to human suffering. But humans remember, Melville remembers, Nindemann remembers. Everyone who survived remembers the ones who didn't. They carry those memories home like they carried their frostbitten feet and their starved bodies. And when they get home, they tell the story. They make sure the world knows what happened here. Let's talk about calories. Not in the abstract sense, not in the diet sense, but in the survival sense, in the how long before your body eats itself sense. An adult man doing hard physical labour in cold weather needs about 4,000 to 5,000 calories per day. That's just to maintain weight and function. You were hauling boats across the Arctic. You were walking 10, sometimes 15 miles a day through terrain that resisted every step. You needed closer to 6,000 calories. What did you get? Let's be generous and say you were on full rations when you left the Jeannette. That's maybe 2,500 calories of hardtack and pemmican per day. Still not enough, but at least it's something. By the time you reached the Delta, you were on half rations, 250 calories, then quarter rations, 625 calories, then nothing, 0 calories from food. Your body had to find fuel elsewhere, and it did. It found it in your muscles, in your fat reserves which were gone within days, in your organs, in the tissues that make up who you are. The human body is remarkably efficient at cannibalizing itself. It has a hierarchy of what to consume. First, fat. That goes quickly. Then muscle. The body breaks down muscle protein and converts it to glucose to feed the brain. This is why starving people look skeletal. Their muscles have been dissolved and used for fuel. Then comes the organs. Not the essential ones, not at first, but things like the digestive system, which doesn't need to be robust if there's no food to digest. The immune system, which is a luxury when you're already dying. These get degraded, broken down, consumed. Your heart shrinks, literally. The cardiac muscle atrophies because the body decides that a smaller heart using less energy is better than a normal heart that might stop from lack of fuel. Your brain starts running on fumes. Cognitive function declines, judgment fails. This is why starving people make bad decisions. Their brains are literally running out of power. DeLong and his crew were living on borrowed time from the moment the Jeannette sank. Every day of inadequate ration was a day of debt. By the time you reached the Delta, that debt was massive. Your body was in triage mode, shutting down non-essential functions, trying desperately to keep the core alive. The cold made it worse, much worse. In sub-zero temperatures, your body burns calories just staying warm. Shivering burns calories. Maintaining core temperature burns calories. Walking through frozen mud while soaking wet burns calories at a terrifying rate. You were burning perhaps 6,000 calories a day and taking in maybe 1,000 on good days, 0 on bad days. The math is brutal. 5,000 calorie deficit per day, 7 days a week, for over a month. A pound of body fat contains roughly 300 calories. A pound of muscle contains about 700 calories. You can do the math. You were losing a pound or more every single day. If you started the march at 180 pounds, you were down to 140 after a month. At 140 pounds, you don't have much left to lose. That's when the body starts making terrible choices about what to shut down. Let's talk about hypothermia, not the dramatic movie version where someone falls through ice and dies in minutes. The slow version, the version that took weeks to kill you. Hypothermia starts when your core body temperature drops below 95 degrees Fahrenheit. Normal is 98.6. That's only a 3.6 degree drop. It doesn't sound like much. It's everything. Mild hypothermia, 95 to 90 degrees, is unpleasant but survivable. You shiver violently, your hands get clumsy, you can't do fine motor tasks, your thinking is slow, but you're functional. You can walk, you can make decisions, you can keep yourself alive if you have food and shelter and warmth. You had none of those things, so your core temperature kept dropping. 90 to 8 degrees, moderate hypothermia. The shivering stops, which seems like a relief but is actually catastrophic. Shivering is your body's last-ditch effort to generate heat. When it stops, it means your body has given up on warming itself and is now just trying to keep vital organs functional. Your muscles become rigid. Your movements are jerky and uncoordinated. Your speech is slurred. Your brain is foggy. You make stupid decisions. You might try to remove your clothes because you feel hot, even, though you're freezing. This is called paradoxical undressing, and it's a sign that you're very close to death. Below 85 degrees is severe hypothermia. Your pulse is weak and irregular. Your breathing is shallow. You're barely conscious. You can't walk, you can't speak. You just lie there and wait for your heart to stop, which it will eventually, when it gets too cold to maintain electrical rhythm. This is what happened to most of DeLong's crew. They didn't freeze to death in the dramatic sense. They didn't turn into ice sculptures. They just got colder until their hearts stopped. It probably felt like falling asleep. That's what people who've been resuscitated from near-death hypothermia report. It feels peaceful. You're tired, so tired, and sleep seems like the most natural thing in the world. The cold was inescapable. You were wet constantly, your clothes never dried. Wet fabric conducts heat away from your body 25 times faster than dry fabric. So even when you were in the tent, even when you were nominally sheltered, you were still losing heat. Your boots were full of water that turned to slush that turned to ice. Your socks were frozen to your feet. Your feet were frozen inside your socks. Frostbite is just localized hypothermia. The tissue gets so cold that ice crystals form inside the cells. The cells rupture. The tissue dies. Hans Eriksson's feet were black because the tissue had died days before he did. The blackness was dead flesh, the same black you see on forgotten meat in a freezer. His body was trying to isolate the dead parts, draw a line between living tissue and dead, but there was no way to heal. Healing requires blood flow and calories and warmth. He had none of these. Everyone's feet were damaged, some worse than others, but everyone had some degree of frostbite. Toes that were numb, heels that were blistered, skin that had frozen and thawed and frozen again until it was a mass of damaged tissue. And you had to keep walking on these feet. Every step hurt. Every step did more damage. But stopping meant dying, so you walked. And walked. And walked. Until walking was impossible. Until your feet simply refused. Until you sat down and couldn't get up. Here's the thing that's hard to understand from the comfort of the present. You were truly alone. Not alone in the sense of being far from other people. Alone in the sense that no one knew where you were, no one could help you, and by the time they could, it would be too late. In 1881, there was no radio, no satellite phones, no GPS, no emergency beacons. Once you left the Jeannette, once you entered the Delta, you disappeared from the world. Your location was a mystery, your status was unknown. The only way anyone could find you was by physically searching, and the Delta was vast. The Lena Delta is roughly 18,000 square miles. That's bigger than Switzerland. It's a maze of rivers and islands and channels that constantly shift. In summer it's impassable, marsh. In winter it's frozen but still treacherous, and you were somewhere in there, somewhere in 18,000 square miles of nothing. Melville searched as best he could, but he was one man with a few dog teams and guides who were understandably reluctant to risk their lives for strangers. He searched the most likely areas. He followed your trail as far as he could, but the Delta swallowed you. By the time he got close, you were already dead. Even if rescue had been better organised, even if there had been dozens of search parties instead of one, the timeline was impossible. You landed on September 17th. You died on or around October 30th. That's 6 weeks. Rescue would have needed to find you, assess your condition, and extract you within 6 weeks. But nobody knew you needed rescue until Nindemann and Noros reached Boulogne on October 29th, one day before you died. Even if Melville had left immediately, even if he had travelled at impossible speed, he couldn't have reached you in time. The geography was against you. The technology was against you. The timeline was against you. You were doomed from the moment DeLong's boat landed in the wrong part of the Delta, 95 miles from the nearest settlement, with food for 4 days. There's a brutal lesson here about exploration and hubris and the limits of human endurance. DeLong was a good officer. He made reasonable decisions based on the information he had. But the information was wrong. Peterman's maps were fiction. The settlements didn't exist. The easy paths didn't exist. And once you were in the Delta, once you were committed, there was no backup plan. Modern explorers have satellite phones. They have GPS trackers that beacon their position every hour. They have emergency extraction. You had none of this. You had your feet and your fofo and your faith and not much else. This is why you wouldn't survive this ordeal, even if you were transported back in time with all your modern knowledge. because your knowledge is useless without technology. You might know that GPS exists. That doesn't help you when GPS doesn't exist yet. You might know about hypothermia and calorie requirements. That doesn't help you when you have no food and no way to get warm. The Jeannette Expedition failed because the Arctic is vast and cold and utterly indifferent to human ambition. Men died because the ice crushed their ship and the cold crushed their bodies and the distance crushed their hope. Simple as that. Brutal as that. Listen to your heartbeat. Imagine it slowing. Imagine the cold seeping deeper with each beat. Imagine knowing that help isn't coming, that no one knows where you are, that you're going to die here in the mud, and the only question is how long it takes. That was the reality for DeLong and his men. That is the reality you would face. And against that reality, courage and determination and Navy training are whispers in a storm. Necessary, admirable, insufficient. George Washington DeLong was 37 years old when the Jeannette sank. He'd been in the Navy since he was a teenager, graduated from Annapolis, served with distinction. He was smart, disciplined, thorough, exactly the kind of officer you want leading an Arctic expedition. He was also stubborn. Maybe that's unfair, maybe determined is better. But there's a fine line between determination and stubbornness, and DeLong walked it constantly. He believed in the mission. Even after 2 years trapped in ice, even after the ship sank, he believed that the expedition could accomplish something worthwhile. Not the North Pole, obviously. That dream died early. But scientific discovery, geographical knowledge, delicable, something to justify the cost and risk. His journal shows a man who never stopped leading. Every day he made decisions. Where to march, how to ration food, who to send ahead, how to keep morale up. He was systematic, careful. He wrote everything down, positions, conditions, the state of his men. The last entries are heartbreaking. His handwriting deteriorates as he gets weaker. The sentences get shorter, but he keeps writing. He keeps recording. Even when he knows he's dying, he's thinking about the record. Someone needs to know what happened here. There's a debate among historians about whether DeLong made the right choices. Should he have sent Nindemann and Noros earlier? Should he have pushed the crew harder in the first days when they still had energy? Should he have stayed at one of the hunting huts and waited for someone to find them? These are questions asked by people who weren't there. People who didn't feel the hunger or the cold. People who have the luxury of hindsight. DeLong made the best decisions he could with the information available. He kept his crew together. He maintained discipline. He never gave up. Even at the end, when it was clear he was dying, he tried to reach higher ground. Maybe to see further. Maybe to be more visible to rescuers. Maybe just because sitting still felt like surrender. And DeLong didn't know how to surrender. He died 50 yards from the tent. Ambler and Assam died near him. 3 men who tried one last time to do something, anything to change their fate. It didn't work, but they tried. That counts for something. George Melville was cut from different cloth than DeLong. DeLong was Navy through and through, rigid in some ways, formal. Melville was practical, an engineer, a problem solver. He saw obstacles as things to overcome, not tragedies to endure. When the storm separated the boats, Melville did what engineers do. He assessed the situation. He had a boat, 10 men, some provisions. The storm was pushing them south. He couldn't control the weather, but he could control how he responded to it. He kept his crew working. Keep bailing. Keep the bow pointed right. Stay sharp. The work kept them warm, kept them focused, gave them something to do besides panic. When they landed, Melville didn't wait for rescue. He went looking for it. He organised his men, rationed the food, made contact with natives. He was flexible, adaptable. When something didn't work, he tried something else. After reaching safety, he could have stayed there. Could have said, "I saved my crew, my job is done." Instead, he spent months searching for DeLong. He risked his life repeatedly going into the Delta in winter. He wouldn't abandon his shipmates even when they were probably dead. This is what made the difference. Luck played a role, certainly. Melville's boat landed in a better spot. But Melville also made his own luck through competence and refusal to quit. Years later, Melville rose to the rank of Rear Admiral. He had a distinguished career, but he never forgot the Jeannette, never forgot the men who died. He wrote reports, gave testimony, made sure the story was told accurately. There's a tendency to make Melville the hero of this story, and in many ways he is. But it's worth remembering that DeLong was trying to do the same things. DeLong was also a competent officer who made good decisions. He just had worse luck. His boat landed in the wrong place at the wrong time, and that made all the difference. Let's talk about the crew. The seamen and firemen and coal heavers who don't get their names in the history books, the men who did what they were told and died doing it. Hans Eriksson was a Norwegian immigrant, worked as a seaman on merchant vessels before joining the Jeannette. He was strong, reliable, good at his job. He followed orders. When his feet froze and turned black and hurt so much he wanted to scream, he kept walking because that's what DeLong said to do. He died because his body couldn't go any further. Not because he was weak, not because he quit, because the human body has limits, and he found his. Heinrich Kack, Walter Lee, Adolf Dressler, Nelsie Iverson, Carl Gortz, George Boyd. These were working-class men who signed up for an adventure and got a nightmare. They hauled boats across ice, they rode through storms, they starved slowly while following orders. There's something profound about their discipline. They could have mutinied, could have said to hell with this, and struck out on their own. Some expeditions in dire straits have fractured. Men have abandoned their officers and tried to save themselves. DeLong's crew stayed together. They followed the chain of command. They did what they were told until they physically couldn't anymore. That's not just training, that's character. The cook, Sam, was Chinese. He'd been hired in San Francisco's Chinatown. He spoke limited English. He was culturally isolated from the rest of the crew. He had every reason to feel like an outsider. But he stayed with DeLong until the end. He died trying to crawl to higher ground alongside his commander. There's a lesson here about leadership and loyalty and the bonds that form under pressure. These men trusted DeLong. They believed that if anyone could get them out, he could. And even when it became clear that no one could get them out, they didn't blame him. They just endured as long as their bodies allowed. Let's imagine a different expedition. Same ship, same crew, same bad luck with the ice. But this time you have accurate maps. The maps show that Peterman's settlements don't exist. They show the true geography of the Lena Delta, the channels and rivers and the actual locations of villages. Armed with this knowledge, DeLong makes different choices. When the boats separate, DeLong knows to aim for the eastern delta where the settlements are. His boat lands closer to Melville's landing spot. They find Yakuts within days. Everyone survives. The expedition is still a failure in terms of reaching the North Pole, but it's not a tragedy. 13 men don't die. Maps matter. Accurate information matters. Petermann was a brilliant geographer, but he was wrong about the Arctic. His theories about warm water passages and open polar seas were fiction, and his maps, beautiful as they were, directed men to places that didn't exist. This wasn't malicious. Petermann believed his theories. He thought he was helping, but belief doesn't create reality. And in the Arctic, the gap between belief and reality is measured in frozen corpses. DeLong had no way to know the maps were wrong until it was too late. By the time he landed in the Delta, he was committed. He had to trust the map. And the map lied. Here's another what if. What if Bennett had spent more money? What if there had been a supply ship that followed the Jeannette north and waited in the Bering Strait? When the Jeannette didn't return on schedule, the supply ship could have gone looking, could have made contact with Russian authorities, could have organised searches while the crew was still alive instead of months after they were dead. This wasn't unheard of. Some Arctic expeditions had supply vessels, but Bennett was already spending a fortune. The Jeannette was expensive, the modifications were expensive. He probably thought one ship was enough. It wasn't. One ship in the Arctic is a gamble. 2 ships is insurance, but insurance costs money, and a Bennett, for all his wealth, had limits. Let's jump forward in technology. Imagine the Jeannette Expedition happening just 20 years later. Radio exists now. DeLong has a transmitter. When the ship sinks, he sends a distress call. Jeannette lost in pack ice at position 77 DG Fin N155 DG0E. 33 men evacuating by boat and sled to Siberian coast. Send rescue. That message reaches the outside world. Navies mobilise, Russian authorities are alerted. Search parties are organised while DeLong is still on the ice, still strong enough to survive. Or imagine this, DeLong has a radio when he lands in the Delta. He can call for help, give his exact position, say, we're 95 miles north of where we expected to land, we have food for 4 days, send help immediately. Melville, already in Boulogne, gets the message. He organises a rescue party that knows exactly where to go. They reach DeLong's party within a week. Everyone lives. Radio wouldn't exist for another 2 decades. But if it had, if DeLong could have called for help, The Siberian Death March would be a story of survival instead of tragedy. Let's be realistic. You, a modern person, get dropped into DeLong's situation. You have modern cold weather gear, Gore-Tex parka, insulated boots, synthetic base layers that wick moisture, a good sleeping bag, a portable stove. This helps. It helps a lot. You stay warmer than DeLong's crew, you dry your clothes, you melt water more efficiently, your frostbite is less severe. But you still have the same fundamental problem. No food, no way to call for rescue, no accurate map. You're still 95 miles from salvation with 4 days of rations. Your gear buys you time. Maybe you last 6 weeks instead of 5. Maybe you make it 60 miles instead of 40. But unless you get very lucky, unless you stumble upon a Yakut camp in the first week, you still die. Better gear reduces the rate at which you die. It doesn't eliminate the dying. For that you need food. And the Arctic Ocean north of Siberia in autumn is not generous with food. You could hunt maybe, if you're an experienced hunter, if you have ammunition, if there's game. But DeLong had a hunter, Alexei, and he managed to shoot one deer. One, in a month of trying. Modern gear is not a magic bullet. It's an advantage, but it's an advantage in a game where the baseline is you're probably going to die. Going from 95% chance of death to 85% chance of death is significant, but it's still not good odds. When Melville reached the campsite on March 23, 1882, the bodies had been frozen for 5 months. The Arctic had turned them into ice sculptures preserved in the moment of death. DeLong was on his knees, head down like he'd been crawling and just stopped. His face was peaceful. Whatever pain he'd felt had ended in death. He looked asleep. Ambler and Assam were near him. They'd made it 50 yards from the tent, not far, but far enough to show they tried. They died together, which maybe offered some comfort in those final moments. The tent held more bodies, men who'd died earlier, who'd been too weak to move. They were arranged neatly. Someone, probably DeLong, had made them comfortable, closed their eyes, crossed their hands, maintained dignity even in death. Melville and his party dug through snow to recover everything. The bodies, the journals, the personal effects. This wasn't just a recovery mission, it was archaeology. They were reading the final chapter of a story, trying to understand what happened. The journals told most of it. DeLong had written everything down, who died when, what they ate, how far they walked. It was all there in neat handwriting that deteriorated as he weakened. The bodies told the rest. The autopsy reports conducted later showed severe malnutrition. Organs atrophied from starvation, muscle tissue depleted. These men had been living skeletons at the end. Frostbite was evident on every body, blackened fingers and toes. Tissue damage on feet and hands. Some of the men had tried to remove their boots in the final days, and the boots had frozen to their feet. Melville's team had to chip away ice to separate boot from flesh. Melville built a cairn over the burial site, a tall pile of rocks with a wooden cross. It was remote, inaccessible most of the year, but it marked the spot. It said, "Men died here and we remember." But America wanted its heroes home. In 1883, Lieutenant Giles Harbour was sent to Siberia to recover the bodies. It was an ordeal. You can't transport frozen corpses in summer. You have to wait for winter when the ground is hard and sleds can travel. Harbour waited in Yakutsk through the summer and fall. When winter came, he went north to the burial site. The bodies were exhumed, placed in metal coffins loaded onto sleds. Then began the journey south, thousands of miles by sled, then by train across Russia, then by ship across the Atlantic. The bodies of DeLong and 11 of his men came home in February 1884. New York gave them a hero's welcome. Crowds lined the streets. The Navy provided honour guards. 7 bodies, including DeLong's, were buried together at Woodlawn Cemetery in the Bronx. The others were claimed by families for private burials. In 1890, a monument was erected at the Naval Academy in Annapolis, a tall stone cairn topped with an icy cross, replica of the one Melville built in Siberia. The monument lists all the dead, not just DeLong's party, but Chip's lost men too. 8 names with no bodies, no graves, just memories and a stone that says they mattered. Lieutenant Charles Chip's boat disappeared in the storm of September 12, 1881. 8 men were aboard. The boat was smaller than the others, less seaworthy. When the storm hit, it simply vanished. Melville searched for them, spent weeks examining the coastline where they might have washed up, found nothing. No boat, no bodies, no wreckage. Nothing. They probably drowned. That's the most likely scenario. The boat capsized in the storm. The men went into water so cold it kills in minutes. They didn't suffer long. That's what survivors tell themselves. But maybe not. Maybe the boat survived the storm. Maybe Chip and his crew landed somewhere even more remote than DeLong. Maybe they walked inland and died, and their bodies are still out there, somewhere in the Siberian wilderness, waiting to be found. The uncertainty is almost worse than knowing. DeLong's men have graves. Chip's men have question marks. They disappeared as completely as if they'd sailed off the edge of the world. 8 names on the Annapolis monument. 8 men who were trying to reach the North Pole and ended up in the Arctic Ocean with no ship and no chance. They deserve to be remembered even if we don't know exactly how they died. The Jeannette Expedition failed spectacularly. 20 men dead, ship lost, North Pole not reached. By any objective measure, it was a disaster. But disasters teach lessons, and the Jeannette taught several. First, the open polar sea is a myth. The expedition spent 2 years in pack ice north of Siberia and found nothing but more ice. Peterman's theory was wrong. The Arctic Ocean is frozen solid, ice all the way down to the pole. This changed how people thought about reaching the North Pole. You weren't going to sail there. The only way was over the ice, on sleds and skis, or under it, in submarines. The dream of a ship reaching the pole was dead. Second, you need better logistics. One ship is not enough. You need supply caches, you need support vessels, you need redundancy built into every system because the Arctic will break something and you need backups. Future expeditions learned this. Nansen's Fram expedition, a decade later, was designed to drift with the ice, but it had supplies for years, not months. Robert Peary's expeditions to the pole in the 1900s used multiple support teams that laid supply caches. Third, indigenous knowledge matters. The Yakuts knew how to survive in the Delta. They had dogs that could pull sleds in winter. They had techniques for finding food and shelter. DeLong didn't have access to that knowledge until it was too late. Later explorers made a point of hiring native guides and learning from them. Peary used Inuit guides extensively. Roald Amundsen famously learned from indigenous peoples how to use dogs and sleds and survive in polar conditions. The Jeannette's failure was educational. Expensive education. 20 men paid for those lessons with their lives. But the lessons were learned and future explorers benefited. Here's a strange epilogue. In 1884, 3 years after the Jeannette sank, wreckage from the ship was found on the southwestern coast of Greenland. A list of supplies. Some clothing marked with the ship's name. Driftwood that was identifiable as coming from the Jeannette. Greenland is thousands of miles from where the ship sank. The wreckage had drifted across the entire Arctic Ocean through the ice around the top of the world. This proved that there was a current flowing from east to west across the polar basin. Fridtjof Nansen saw this and had an idea. If wreckage could drift across the Arctic, why not a ship? He designed the Fram, a vessel meant to be frozen into the ice and drift with it. The Fram expedition of 1893 to 1896 was directly inspired by the Jeannette's fate. Nansen didn't reach the North Pole either, but the Fram proved you could survive years in the ice if you planned for it. The ship drifted from Siberia to the Atlantic, trapped in ice the whole way, and came out intact with all crew alive. So the Jeannette's wreckage accomplished something the Jeannette herself couldn't. It provided data. It proved a theory. It inspired success. Imagine if we could find the Jeannette today. She's down there somewhere, in about 1,800 feet of water, north of the Siberian coast. Probably mostly intact. Wood doesn't rot in the cold depths of the Arctic Ocean. With modern submersibles, we could photograph her, see exactly how the ice crushed her hull, recover more artifacts, maybe find some of the scientific instruments that went down with the ship. It would be archaeological gold, a perfectly preserved time capsule from 1881. We could learn details about ship construction, about the equipment explorers used, about daily life during the expedition. The challenge is that she's in Russian waters, in a politically sensitive area, near islands that Russia claims. Any expedition to find her would need Russian cooperation. In the current geopolitical climate, that's difficult. But someday, maybe. Someday we might bring the Jeannette home, the way we brought DeLong's body home. Give her a place in a museum where people can see her and remember the 33 men who sailed her into the ice. Let's be honest about who you are. You're reading this on a screen. You're probably sitting down. You're probably at a comfortable temperature. When was the last time you were truly hungry? Not skipped lunch hungry, actually starving. When was the last time you were so cold you couldn't feel your fingers? You live in a world of abundance. Food is everywhere. Heat is everywhere. If you're cold, you turn up the thermostat. If you're hungry, you open the fridge. This is good. This is how life should be. But it makes you so soft. DeLong's crew had already been hardened by 2 years in the Arctic. They'd already adapted to cold and privation. They'd already learned to function with inadequate food and constant discomfort. And they died anyway. You'd die faster. Your body doesn't know how to conserve energy. Your mind doesn't know how to endure without distraction. You've never walked 10 miles carrying a heavy pack. You've never gone a week without washing. You've never slept on ice. This isn't criticism. It's just reality. Modern life is comfortable. Comfort is the opposite of the skills you'd need to survive the Siberian death march. Survival in extremity isn't just physical, it's mental. You have to be able to endure suffering without breaking. You have to keep going when your body says stop. You have to maintain discipline when everything is chaos. DeLong's crew were Navy men. They'd been trained to follow orders, to maintain structure, to keep going even when things were terrible. That training saved some of them, kept them together, kept them trying. You don't have that training. When things get hard, you quit. Not because you're weak, because you have the option to quit. You've never been in a situation where quitting means death. On the Siberian death march, there was no quitting. You walked or you died, and when you couldn't walk anymore, you died. That level of existential pressure is beyond what most modern people have ever experienced. Could you adapt? Maybe. Some people have deep reserves of resilience they don't know about until tested. But most people would break, would give up, would lie down in the snow and close their eyes and wait for it to be over. Even if you're tough, even if you're smart, even if you have all the skills and knowledge and mental strength in the world, the odds are still overwhelmingly against you. 13 men in DeLong's boat. 11 died. That's an 85% fatality rate. 2 survived only because they were sent ahead before things got truly desperate. If they'd stayed, they probably would have died too. Melville's boat had better luck. 10 men all survived, but they landed in a better spot. They found help faster. If they'd landed where DeLong landed, they probably would have had similar results. So your odds, statistically, are somewhere between 0% and 15%, depending on which boat you're in and where you land. Those are not good odds, and that's assuming you make it onto a boat. Chip's boat, 100% fatality rate. If you're on that boat, you don't even get a death march. You just drown in the storm. This is the brutal truth of the Jeannette Expedition. Most people died. The ones who survived were a combination of tough, lucky, and in the right place at the right time. You can't control luck. You can't control where your boat lands. You can control being tough, but even that might not be enough. October 9th. DeLong sends Nindemann and Noros ahead. They're the 2 fittest men. They have the best chance of reaching help. He's hoping that they can bring rescue back for the rest of the crew. They succeed. They reach Boulogne. They find Melville. But by the time rescue can be organised, everyone else is dead. Hindsight says DeLong should have sent them earlier. Week 1, day 1, the moment they landed, send the fast guys ahead immediately. Don't wait until everyone is dying. But DeLong didn't have hindsight. He had hope. He thought they could all make it together, and separating the crew is risky. What if Nindemann and Noros get lost? What if they die? Then you've sacrificed your 2 best men for nothing. DeLong kept the crew together as long as he could. By the time he sent men ahead, it was too late. But was that the wrong decision? Or was it the right decision that happened to fail? There's no good answer. Leadership in extremity requires choices with incomplete information. DeLong made the choices that seemed best at the time. They didn't work, but different choices might not have worked either. James Gordon Bennett spent a fortune on the Jeannette Expedition. DeLong and his crew risked their lives. 20 men died. Was it worth it? The expedition didn't reach the North Pole. It didn't prove Peterman's theories. It didn't even make any major discoveries. The islands it found are small and uninhabited and strategically meaningless. So what was gained? Some scientific data, some meteorological observations, a story that captivated the public for a few years. That's it. Was that worth 20 lives? Was that worth DeLong freezing to death in the Siberian mud? Was that worth 8 men drowning in the Arctic Ocean? You can argue it was. Exploration has costs. We learn about the world by testing our limits. Sometimes people die in that process. It's tragic, but it's also how progress happens. Or you can argue it wasn't. That the North Pole is just a spot on a map. That glory is ephemeral. That no amount of knowledge justifies sending men to almost certain death. Bennett probably never asked himself these questions. He was a newspaper man. He wanted a story. He got one. Whether it was worth it probably never occurred to him. DeLong might have asked. In his final days, lying in the tent, listening to his men die one by one, did he wonder if it was worth it? Did he regret taking the assignment? We'll never know. He didn't write it down. 13 men survived the Jeannette Expedition. Melville's 10, Nindemann and Noros. They came home. They lived. They had careers and families and long lives. Were they tougher than the men who died? Or just luckier? Melville was competent, no question. He made good decisions. He kept his crew together. He found help, but he also landed in a better spot. If his boat had grounded where DeLong's did, would he have done better? Maybe. Probably. Melville had skills DeLong didn't. He was more adaptable, more practical, but even Melville couldn't have walked 95 miles on no food. Even Melville would have needed luck. Nindemann and Noros were tough, young and strong and determined, but they also left before the situation became hopeless. They had a head start. They had enough food to last until they found help. Luck matters. It matters a lot. You can be the toughest, smartest, most prepared person in the world. If you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, you die. That's the uncomfortable truth. The men who died weren't weak. They weren't stupid. They weren't cowards. They were just unlucky. Wrong boat, wrong landing spot, wrong map, wrong season. A series of small bad lucks that added up to death. The survivors weren't heroes, not really. They were sailors who did their jobs and got lucky. That's not diminishing what they did. It's acknowledging that in the Arctic, at the edge of human endurance, luck is often the difference between life and death. 33 men left San Francisco on July the 8th, 1879. They were going to reach the North Pole. They were going to plant the American flag at the top of the world. They were going to come home heroes. 13 came home. 20 died. The Jeannette sank. The North Pole remained untouched. The expedition was, by its own goals, a complete failure. But something remains. Not in the ice. The ice doesn't remember. The ice doesn't care. It's already forgotten the Jeannette, the way it forgets everything human. What remains is in the journals, in DeLong's careful entries, documenting the end of his crew, in Melville's reports of the search, in the bodies brought home and buried with honour, in the monument at Annapolis that lists the names of the dead. What remains is the story, and the story asks a question. Would you make the same choices? Would you sail into the Arctic knowing the risks? Would you keep walking when your feet were frozen and your belly was empty? Would you send your strongest men ahead, knowing it might doom you and save them? Would you keep writing in your journal even as you were dying so someone would know what happened? These aren't hypothetical questions. They are the questions DeLong faced. They're the questions anyone faces at the extremity of human experience. There's no shame in saying no, in saying I wouldn't survive this because I'm smart enough not to try. Modern comfort is worth preserving. You don't have to test yourself against the Arctic to prove you're tough. But there's also something admirable in saying yes, in saying I would try, I would walk until I couldn't walk, I would do my duty until my body failed. That's what DeLong and his crew did. They didn't quit. They died, but they didn't quit. The Siberian death march killed 20 men. It would kill you too, probably. The cold and the hunger and the distance would grind you down until there was nothing left. Your body would fail, your will would break, you'd lie down in the snow and close your eyes, and that would be the end. But maybe, just maybe, you'd make it. Maybe you'd be in Melville's boat. Maybe you'd land near help. Maybe you'd be strong enough and lucky enough and stubborn enough to walk out of hell and into history. The odds are bad. The Arctic doesn't offer fair fights. But the men of the Jeannette proved that humans can endure things that seem impossible, that we can walk through hell if we have to, that we die hard. So here's the final question, the one that matters. When faced with certain death and a narrow path to survival, would you take that path, or would you give up? DeLong took the path. He walked it as far as his frozen feet would carry him. Then he crawled. Then he died. But he tried. Against odds that were mathematically impossible, he tried. That's the lesson of the Jeannette. Not that exploration is glorious, not that the Arctic is conquerable, but that humans, when pushed to the absolute limit, will keep trying, will keep walking, will keep hoping, even when hope is a lie, even when the math says you're already dead, even when the ice is grinding your ship to splinters and the cold is grinding your body to nothing. You'll try, because trying is what humans do. It's our superpower and our curse. We try even when we shouldn't. We hope even when hope is foolish. We walk into the Arctic and think we'll conquer it, even though the Arctic has never been conquered and never will be. 20 men died proving this. Their bodies are home now in graves with headstones, but their story is still out there, in the delta where they walked, in the ice where their ship sank, in the journals that recorded their final days. The ice doesn't remember, but we do, and we tell the story so that maybe, just maybe, someone learns from it. Probably not. Someone will read this and think, I could do it, I could survive, and maybe they'll try, and maybe they'll die. And the story will repeat itself because humans are stubborn and ambitious and don't learn from history as well as we should. But at least they'll know. They'll know what they're walking into. They'll know the odds. They'll know that the Siberian Death March is called that for a reason. And if they go anyway, if they sail into the Arctic with open eyes and full knowledge of what awaits, then they're in good company. The company of explorers and dreamers and fools who think they can beat the odds, who think they can be the exception, who believe that this time, with better preparation and more luck and stronger will, they'll make it. Most of them won't. The ice will take them, the cold will take them, the distance and the hunger and the darkness will take them. But some will survive, some will walk out of the Arctic and into legend, and they'll have one hell of a story to tell. Sleep well, knowing you're not on the ice tonight. Sleep well in your warm bed in your safe house. And tomorrow, when you wake up, take a moment to be grateful. Grateful that you live in a time and place where survival isn't a daily struggle. Where the nearest settlement isn't 95 miles of frozen hell away. The men of the Jeannette didn't have that luxury. They died so that we could learn. So that exploration could advance. So that someone could stand at the North Pole someday and plant a flag. Was it worth it? That's for you to decide. But at least now you know the price. 20 men, 1 ship, and a death march that still haunts the Siberian Delta, even though the ice remembers nothing. Good night, and maybe dream of warmer places.